Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Liberty, watching the vast emptiness of space through the main viewing screen. Behind him, 50,000 human colonists slept in their pods, dreaming of their new home. They had traveled for 2 years to reach this forgotten corner of the galaxy called Vestan Reach. "Captain, we're approaching the Vesta Prime system," announced Communications Officer Kate Adams from her station. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that Jake understood well. This was humanity's first attempt to build a colony beyond the Galactic Coalition's controlled space. Jake nodded and turned to his security chief, Alex Hunter. "Any signs of other ships in the area?" Alex checked his sensors carefully. "Nothing, sir. The system appears completely empty, just like the surveys indicated." The planet Vesta Prime appeared on their screens as they drew closer. It was a beautiful, blue and green world surrounded by dangerous asteroid fields that had kept other species away. Most aliens considered this system worthless because of those asteroids, but humans saw opportunity where others saw danger. "Wake up, Chief Administrator, Lisa Grant and Engineer Paul Carter," Jake ordered. "It's time to begin the colonization process." Within hours, the colonists were awake and preparing for their new life. Lisa Grant took charge of organizing the settlers, while Paul Carter focused on the technical challenges of building their first city. They chose a location near a large freshwater lake and began construction immediately. The work went well for the first few weeks. The colonists built homes, farms, and workshops with amazing speed. Dr. Ryan Bell set up a medical facility, while engineer Maria Lopez established power systems using the planet's abundant geothermal energy. Everyone worked together with a shared dream of creating something new and free. Jake often walked through the growing settlement, which they named New Terra. Children played in the streets while their parents built the future. Security Chief Alex Hunter trained volunteer guards, though they expected no trouble in this remote system. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Lisa Grant said one evening as she and Jake watched the sunset over their new city. "We've actually done it. We've built our own world." Jake smiled but felt a nagging worry. "It's almost too perfect. In my experience, things this good don't last without challenges." His words proved prophetic 3 days later. Kate Adams burst into Jake's office with terror in her eyes. "Captain, you need to see this immediately. We're receiving signals from unknown ships approaching the system." Jake rushed to the communications center where the entire senior staff had gathered. On the main screen, a massive alien fleet emerged from hyperspace. The ships were unlike anything humans had seen before. Dark, angular vessels that seemed to cut through space like knives. "How many ships?" Jake asked, his voice steady despite the fear growing in his stomach. "At least 50 capital ships, sir," Alex Hunter reported, "and they're heading straight for us." The lead alien ship sent a transmission. The being that appeared on screen was tall and thin, with gray skin and cold yellow eyes. When it spoke, its voice was harsh and commanding. "I am War Admiral Thexvar of the Zephyrian Empire. You primitive creatures have trespassed on Imperial territory. You will evacuate this system within 72 hours or face complete destruction." Jake stepped forward, trying to remain calm. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human colony ship, Liberty. We claim this system under the laws of galactic settlement. This region was unclaimed when we arrived." The alien's eyes narrowed with contempt. "Your species is not recognized by the Zephyrian Empire. You have no rights here. Remove yourselves or be removed." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the humans in stunned silence. Lisa Grant was the first to speak. "We can't just leave. These people gave up everything to come here. This is their home now." Paul Carter nodded grimly. "We've invested too much to simply run away. But how can we fight that fleet?" Jake looked around at his staff. Military strategist Sam Brooks was already studying tactical displays, while weapons specialist Amy Stone checked their defensive capabilities. The numbers were not encouraging. "We have 37 civilian ships, most of them converted cargo vessels," Alex Hunter reported. "Our weapons are limited to mining lasers and a few old military surplus guns. Against their fleet, we don't stand a chance in direct combat." "Maybe. We don't need direct combat," Sam Brooks suggested. This asteroid field that kept other species away could work in our favor. We know these rocks better than anyone. Amy Stone added. Our mining equipment could be modified. The fusion cutting tools pack enough power to damage their ships if we can get close enough. Jake made the hardest decision of his life. We're not running. Send a message to all colonists. Anyone who wants to leave can take the civilian transports, but those who stay will fight for our home. The next day, Jake was amazed to discover that less than 500 people chose to leave. 49,500 colonists decided to stay and defend New Terra. Dr. Ryan Bell and engineer Maria Lopez worked frantically to modify equipment for combat. Miners became soldiers overnight. Farmers learned to operate weapons. Teachers helped plan defensive strategies. The entire colony transformed into a fortress in just 3 days. On the final day, Jake stood before his people in the colony's main square. Today we face an enemy that sees us as nothing more than insects to be swept aside. They don't understand what they're dealing with. They don't know that humans fight hardest when protecting their families and homes. The crowd cheered, but Jake could see the fear in their eyes. They all knew the odds against them. We may not win this battle, Jake continued, but we'll show the galaxy what humans are made of. When they tell stories of this day, they'll remember that we stood our ground. As the Zephyrian fleet moved into attack position, Jake returned to the Liberty's bridge. Kate Adams monitored enemy communications while Alex Hunter coordinated the defense. The asteroid field around them suddenly seemed less like a shield and more like a trap. All stations report ready, Captain, Alex announced. Jake nodded and opened a channel to the entire fleet. This is Captain Morrison to all defenders. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the right of humans to make their own choices in this galaxy. The first Zephyrian ships entered the asteroid field, confident in their superior firepower. They had no idea they were about to learn why humans had earned their place among the stars, through determination and refusal to surrender. The 72-hour deadline passed like a countdown to doom. War Admiral Thexivar sent no final warning. The Zephyrian fleet simply began their attack at exactly the promised time. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the Liberty's bridge as enemy ships moved through the asteroid field in perfect formation. Their confidence was clear. They expected to crush the human settlement within hours. All civilian ships begin protocol endurance, Jake commanded into his communication system. Across the asteroid field, human ships that had carried families to their new homes suddenly transformed into something else entirely. Mining vessels became fighters. Cargo haulers turned into makeshift bombers. Transport ships loaded with colonist volunteers prepared for desperate boarding actions. Engineer Maria Lopez had worked for 3 straight days modifying their fusion reactors. Now her voice crackled over the comm system from the planet's surface. Power grid modifications complete, Captain. We're ready to give them a surprise they won't forget. On the surface of Vesta Prime, Acting Military Commander Sam Brooks coordinated defenses with grim determination. The colonists had turned their peaceful settlement into a fortress. Farmers now operated missile launchers. Teachers monitored radar screens. Children too young to fight huddled in underground shelters with the elderly. First wave of enemy fighters approaching Sector 7, reported Communications Officer Kate Adams. Her usual calm was replaced by barely controlled tension. The battle began when the Zephyrians encountered the first human surprise. Dr. Ryan Bell had suggested using medical knowledge to create a new type of weapon. The humans had seeded the asteroid field with modified medical scanners that could detect the specific biosignatures of Zephyrian life forms. When the alien fighters passed through these scanning fields, automated mining charges detonated around them. The explosions weren't powerful enough to destroy the heavily armored Zephyrian ships, but they damaged sensors and communications. Direct hit on their lead squadron, Security Chief Alex Hunter announced with satisfaction. They're flying blind now. War Admiral Thexivar's voice thundered over the communication channels. Impossible. These creatures have no military technology. But humans had something better than advanced military technology. They had desperation, creativity, and an absolute refusal to surrender their homes. Weapons specialist Amy Stone had spent the deadline period turning every piece of equipment into potential weapons. Atmospheric processors became chemical launchers. Communication arrays were modified to emit disruptive frequencies. Even the colony's waste recycling system had been converted into a weapon that could spray corrosive materials. The real surprise came when the main Zephyrian battle group reached the inner asteroid field. Engineer Paul Carter had positioned the largest mining ships among the rocks disguised as debris. When the enemy fleet passed by, these hidden ships emerged and attacked at point-blank range. "Now," Jake commanded. Pilot Frank Green led the first wave of converted civilian ships against the Zephyrian cruisers. His cargo hauler, now armed with mining lasers and improvised missiles, dove straight at an enemy ship 10 times its size. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy like this. Their military training taught them to fight other organized fleets with predictable tactics. But humans fought like cornered animals, using every dirty trick and desperate strategy they could imagine. Commander Beth Young coordinated the ground defenses as Zephyrian dropships attempted to land near New Terra. The colonists had prepared surprises there too. The landing zones had been seeded with modified industrial equipment that created electromagnetic pulses, disrupting alien navigation systems. "Their landing craft are crashing into the lake," Beth reported with fierce joy. "The electromagnetic field is scrambling their guidance systems." But the humans were taking terrible losses. The Liberty shuddered under enemy fire as Jake watched. His people die for their new home. Civilian ships exploded around him, taking brave volunteers into the cold vacuum of space. "Captain, we've lost the mining ship New Hope," Kate Adams reported, tears streaming down her face. "All hands lost." Jake's heart broke with each report, but he forced himself to continue fighting. This wasn't just about winning anymore. This was about making sure the galaxy remembered what happened when someone threatened human families. The turning point came when weapons specialist Amy Stone implemented her most dangerous plan. She had modified the colony's main fusion reactor to overload in a controlled manner, creating a massive energy pulse that could disable electronics across the entire system. All human ships shut down non-essential systems and prepare for electromagnetic surge, Amy announced. The pulse erupted from Vesta Prime like an artificial star. Across the battlefield, Zephyrian ships found their weapon systems failing, their shields dropping, their communications disrupted. In that moment of enemy confusion, Jake made his final decision. "All ships target the enemy flagship. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten human homes." The Liberty, damaged and bleeding atmosphere, led a desperate charge against War Admiral Thexvar's massive command ship. The Zephyrian vessel was 5 times larger than any human ship, but Jake didn't care about the odds anymore. "Kate, open a channel to the entire galaxy," Jake ordered. "Sir, we're transmitting on all frequencies," Kate confirmed. Jake spoke clearly and calmly as his ship flew directly at the enemy flagship. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human colony at Vestan Reach. To anyone listening across the galaxy, remember this day. Remember what happens when you threaten human families. We are not the strongest species among the stars, but we are the ones who will never surrender." The Liberty's modified mining lasers tore through the Zephyrian flagship's shields. Enemy return fire crippled the human ship, but Jake kept flying straight at his target. "For New Terra," he shouted as the Liberty smashed into the enemy command bridge. The explosion lit up the asteroid field like a new sun. War Admiral Thexvar's flagship broke apart, sending shockwaves through the remaining Zephyrian fleet. On the surface, the colonists watched their captain die and felt something change inside them. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving that humans belonged among the stars. The battle continued for 6 more hours, but something fundamental had shifted. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that simply refused to be defeated. Every time they destroyed a human ship, another one appeared from the asteroids. Every time they thought they had won, the humans found a new way to strike back. When the Zephyrian fleet finally retreated, they left behind a human colony that had been transformed by fire and loss. The survivors looked up at the stars and knew that the galaxy would never see them the same way again. The Battle of Vestan Reach was over, But the war for humanity's place among the stars had just begun. 3 weeks after the Battle of Vestan Reach, Admiral Grace Miller stood in the Earth Defense Force headquarters, staring at reports that changed everything. The news of human defiance had spread across the galaxy, faster than anyone expected. How? Many species have requested the battle footage? Admiral Miller asked Intelligence Officer Dan Foster. 17 so far, ma'am, Dan replied, checking his datapad. The Altarians, the Corvan Republic, even some coalition member species are asking for detailed tactical analysis. Admiral Miller frowned. This was unprecedented. For decades, humans had been considered a minor species, barely worth notice by the galaxy's major powers. Now suddenly, everyone wanted to understand how a small human colony had fought off the mighty Zephyrian Empire. On the diplomatic front, Ambassador Helen Clark faced a very different situation at Coalition headquarters. The massive space station orbited the neutral world of Centauri Prime, where representatives from hundreds of species gathered to maintain galactic peace. The Zephyrian delegation demands an explanation for human aggression, announced the Coalition speaker, a tall being from the ancient Valdorian race. They claim your species violated the peace accords. Helen stood calmly before the assembled representatives. She had prepared for this moment since receiving the first reports from Vestan Reach. Honored speaker, humans did not violate any accords. We established a colony in unclaimed space. When threatened with extermination, we defended ourselves. The Zephyrian representative, a different officer than the one who had died at Vestan Reach, slammed his fist on his speaking podium. Your species showed unacceptable brutality. You destroyed a flagship. Your species threatened to destroy 50,000 civilians, Helen replied calmly. We responded appropriately. But Helen noticed something interesting during the session. While the major powers like the Zephyrians complained loudly, smaller species watched quietly with obvious interest. After the formal session ended, several minor species approached her privately. Ambassador Clark, whispered Kalatar of the Rimworld Federation. My people would like to discuss mutual defense agreements with humanity. Similar conversations happened throughout the week. Species that had been oppressed or threatened by larger empires suddenly saw humans as potential allies. The galaxy's power balance was beginning to shift in ways no one had predicted. Meanwhile, at Vestan Reach, the surviving colonists worked to rebuild their settlement under new leadership. Acting Governor Mike Johnson had taken charge after Captain Morrison's sacrifice. The colony now looked very different from the peaceful farming community it had once been. Perimeter defenses are at 60%, reported Colonel Lucy Price, who had arrived from Earth with the first wave of reinforcements. We're turning this place into a fortress that could stop an entire fleet. Tech specialist Tony White supervised the installation of new defensive systems throughout the asteroid field. We're placing automated weapons platforms on every major asteroid. If the Zephyrians come back, they'll find us much better prepared. The colonists themselves had changed too. Farmer-turned-soldier Pete Morgan now led a militia unit with deadly efficiency. Teacher-turned-tactician Linda Scott developed new combat strategies based on their unique environment. Even the children helped by monitoring communication systems and maintaining equipment. Dr. Ryan Bell worked with engineer Maria Lopez to design completely new types of weapons based on their battle experience. We're not trying to match alien technology, Maria explained to the engineering team. We're developing something uniquely human. The medical officer had discovered that human creativity in desperate situations far exceeded what other species considered normal. While aliens developed weapons through careful research over decades, humans could turn anything into a weapon within hours when their families were threatened. News of these preparations reached Intelligence Officer Dan Foster back on Earth. His reports painted a picture that both excited and worried Earth's leadership. Sir, the colonists aren't just rebuilding, Dan reported to Admiral Miller. They're creating something entirely new. A military colony designed specifically for asymmetric warfare. Admiral Miller studied the tactical reports with growing concern. And the Zephyrians? Intelligence suggests they're assembling a revenge fleet. Emperor Kethmore has personally taken command. They're planning to make an example of Vestan Reach that will discourage any other species from resisting Zephyrian expansion. This news reached Ambassador Helen Clark through encrypted diplomatic channels. The situation was escalating beyond anyone's control. During her next meeting with coalition representatives, Helen made an announcement that surprised everyone. Humanity officially requests emergency session status to address the Zephyrian threat to civilian populations. The coalition. Speaker's expression showed confusion. Ambassador, your species has never requested emergency status before. We've never had our civilians threatened with genocide before, Helen replied firmly. But the real surprise came during the emergency session itself. When Helen presented evidence of Zephyrian plans to eliminate the Vestan Reach colony, she found unexpected support. Representative Veltara of the Alteran Rebellion spoke first. The Alteran support humanity's right to defend their colony. We have suffered similar threats from the Zephyrian Empire. One by one, smaller species began speaking in support of the human position. The galaxy's oppressed peoples had found their voice, inspired by human defiance. Agent Carol Davis, working undercover within Coalition intelligence, discovered the true scope of what was happening. Her report to Earth was marked with the highest security classification. The Zephyrian defeat at Vestan Reach has triggered rebellion movements across 12 systems, Carol reported. Species that have been oppressed for centuries are now actively resisting. The humans have become a symbol of successful defiance. Back at Vestan Reach, the colonists received this news with mixed emotions. Acting Governor Mike Johnson called a colony-wide meeting to discuss their situation. We never intended to start a galactic revolution, Mike told the assembled colonists. We just wanted to protect our homes, but now it seems our fight has inspired others. Pilot Sarah Williams, Captain Morrison's widow, stood to address the crowd. My husband died believing that humans deserved a place among the stars. If our struggle helps other species find their freedom, then his sacrifice meant something. The crowd agreed unanimously. They would continue preparing for the inevitable Zephyrian return, but now they understood they were fighting for more than just their own survival. Colonel Lucy Price received disturbing intelligence reports about the approaching enemy fleet. The Zephyrians are bringing everything they have. Emperor Kethmore himself is leading at least 200 ships. Tech specialist Tony White looked up from his defensive planning. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for them. This time the whole galaxy will be watching. As news of the approaching Zephyrian revenge fleet spread across known space, something unprecedented happened. Species from across the galaxy began sending support to the human colony. Some sent supplies, others sent intelligence, and a few, brave species, sent ships. The Battle of Vestan Reach had ended weeks ago, but the war it started was just beginning. Humanity had lit a fire that was spreading across the galaxy, and no one could predict where it would burn next. Admiral Miller looked at the latest reports and realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer fighting alone. Emperor Kethmore of the Zephyrian Empire stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Deathbringer, watching the stars ahead. Behind him stretched the largest military fleet in Zephyrian history, over 300 warships, including the Empire's most powerful dreadnoughts. My Emperor, reported Fleet Admiral Vextar, our scouts confirm the human colony still exists. They appear to have reinforced their defenses. Kethmore's yellow eyes burned with cold fury. It matters not. We will turn their world into molten glass. No species will dare defy the Empire after we finish with these insects. The Emperor had taken personal command because the defeat at Vestan Reach had shaken the foundations of Zephyrian power. Across the galaxy, subject species were beginning to question Zephyrian invincibility. This rebellion had to be crushed completely, but Kethmore was unaware that his fleet was being watched. Agent Carol Davis, working deep within Coalition intelligence networks, had been tracking Zephyrian fleet movements for weeks. The entire Zephyrian Navy is moving toward Vestan Reach, Carol reported to Earth through encrypted channels. They're bringing everything. Battle cruisers, assault carriers, planetary bombardment ships. They plan to make an example that will terrorize the entire galaxy. On Earth, General Chris Taylor coordinated humanity's response from the Defense Force Command Center. The situation was desperate. Earth's entire fleet couldn't match the armada heading toward Vestan Reach. "What's our status on reinforcements?" General Taylor asked his staff. "Admiral Miller is en route with 60 ships," reported his aide. "The colonists have been reinforced by Colonel Price's battalion, but it's not enough. They're facing 5-to-1 odds. But humanity had advantages the Zephyrians didn't understand. Dr. Kevin Ross, Earth's leading quantum physicist, had been working on a revolutionary weapon concept inspired by the colonists' creative use of mining equipment. "General, I believe we can create a quantum disruption field using modified asteroid mining charges," Dr. Ross explained excitedly. "If we can position them correctly throughout the asteroid field, we can create cascading energy waves that will disable enemy ship systems." "How long do you need?" General Taylor asked. "The equipment is already being shipped to Vestan Reach. Tech specialist Tony White and engineer Paul Carter can implement the system within days." At Vestan Reach, the colonists prepared for the storm they knew was coming. The settlement had been transformed into a military base, but it still felt like home to the 50,000 people who had chosen to stay and fight. Acting Governor Mike Johnson walked through the fortified streets, checking on the preparations. Children too young to fight helped by carrying supplies and monitoring communications. Elderly colonists who couldn't handle weapons worked in the underground command centers. "How are the new defenses coming along?" Mike asked Colonel Lucy Price. "Better than expected," Lucy replied, pointing to tactical displays. "We've turned every asteroid into a potential weapon. The quantum disruption mines are being installed by Tony White's teams. If the plan works, we'll hit them with technology they've never seen before." The real surprise came when unexpected allies arrived. Representative Veltara of the Alteran Rebellion brought 12 ships through hidden hyperspace routes. "The Alterans cannot officially support humanity," Veltara explained to Colonel Price. "But we can provide intelligence about Zephyrian fleet tactics and weaknesses." The alien commander was tall and graceful, with blue skin and large dark eyes that showed both intelligence and determination. Her people had fought the Zephyrians for decades without success, but they recognized something special in human determination. "Your species fights differently than any we have observed," Veltara told Acting Governor Mike Johnson. "You turn disadvantages into advantages. You make weapons from tools. You refuse to accept defeat even when logic says you should surrender." More allies arrived secretly over the following days. The Corvan Republic sent medical supplies and technical advisors. The Rimworld Federation provided intelligence about Zephyrian fleet movements. Even some coalition member species sent unofficial support. Major Linda Scott, the former teacher who had become one of the colony's best tactical planners, worked with these new allies to develop strategies the Zephyrians wouldn't expect. "They'll come at us in standard formation," Linda explained during a planning session. 3 waves, fighters first, then heavy cruisers, finally the dreadnoughts for planetary bombardment. But they're expecting to fight the same human colony they defeated before. Captain Ben Parker, who had arrived with the latest reinforcements, studied the tactical displays. "What they'll find instead is a trap 50 years in the making. Every lesson learned from human military history, adapted for space warfare." Pilot Frank Green, one of the survivors from the first battle, led training sessions for new pilots. His cargo hauler had been destroyed in the previous fight, but he now commanded a proper fighter squadron. "Remember," Frank told his pilots, "we're not trying to match their technology. We're using their assumptions against them. They think humans fight like other species. They're wrong." The quantum disruption system was completed just days before the Zephyrian fleet arrived. Tech specialist Tony White and engineer Paul Carter had worked with Dr. Kevin Ross's theories to create something completely new. "The mines are positioned throughout the asteroid field," Tony reported to the command staff. "When triggered, they'll create a quantum cascade that should disable electronics across the entire system." "Should?" questioned Colonel Lucy Price. "This is completely untested technology," Paul Carter admitted. "We're combining human quantum theory with alien power sources and asteroid minerals. It could work perfectly, or it could do nothing at all." Engineer Maria Lopez had spent weeks modifying the colony's power grid to support the new weapon system. If it works, we'll have maybe 10 minutes before their systems come back online. That's our window to strike. The colonists understood the stakes. Pilot Sarah Williams, Captain Morrison's widow, had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of all, a reconnaissance flight that would determine exactly when to trigger the quantum cascade. "I'll get close enough to confirm their fleet formation," Sarah explained to the command staff. "Once I transmit the signal, there's no going back. We either win with this plan, or we lose everything." As the Zephyrian fleet approached the edge of the Vestan system, Emperor Kethmore reviewed his battle plans one final time. He had studied every detail of the previous engagement, determined not to underestimate human cunning again. "Deploy scout ships to sweep the asteroid field for mines," the Emperor commanded. "Use long-range bombardment to clear any hidden defenses. I want no surprises this time." But the Emperor couldn't have imagined the scope of human preparation. The colonists had spent months turning their entire system into a weapon. Every asteroid, every piece of debris, every seemingly empty patch of space contained surprises designed by desperate human creativity. On the surface of Vesta Prime, the colonists gathered for what might be their final stand. Acting Governor Mike Johnson addressed them over the colony's communication system. "Tomorrow we face an enemy that wants to destroy not just us, but the idea that small species can resist oppression. We're fighting for every species in the galaxy that dreams of freedom." The colonists cheered, but they also prayed. They had done everything possible to prepare, but the approaching fleet was massive beyond imagination. Colonel Lucy Price received the final intelligence report from Agent Carol Davis. "The Zephyrian fleet will arrive in 18 hours. Emperor Kethmore is commanding personally. They're bringing enough firepower to sterilize the entire system." As night fell on Vesta Prime, the colonists looked up at stars that might be their last sight of peace. Tomorrow would bring the largest space battle in galactic history, and humanity's place among the stars hung in the balance. But they were not the same people who had arrived seeking a peaceful new home. They had become something harder, something more dangerous. They had become humans who would not surrender. The Zephyrian armada emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts. 300 warships filled the void around Vestan Reach, their weapons powered and ready for massacre. Emperor Kethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the human colony's small planet through the viewing screen. "Begin the extermination," the Emperor commanded coldly. But the humans were ready. Admiral Grace Miller had arrived during the night with Earth's entire defense fleet, 60 ships carrying humanity's best pilots and newest weapons. Her flagship, the UHS Defiance, took position among the asteroids alongside the surviving colonist vessels. "All ships, this is Admiral Miller," she broadcast on secured channels. "Today we fight not just for Vestan Reach, but for humanity's right to exist among the stars. Remember what Captain Morrison taught us. When humans fight for their families, we become unstoppable." On the surface of Vesta Prime, General Chris Taylor coordinated ground defenses with the colonist leaders. The settlement had been transformed into a fortress that could withstand orbital bombardment, but everyone knew the real battle would be fought in space. "Quantum disruption mines are armed and ready," reported tech specialist Tony White from the Underground Command Center. "All we need is the signal from Sarah Williams." Pilot Sarah Williams flew her reconnaissance fighter deep into the asteroid field, invisible among the floating rocks. Her mission was simple but deadly. Get close enough to the Zephyrian fleet to confirm their formation, then transmit the activation signal for humanity's secret weapon. Through her cockpit window, Sarah could see the massive enemy ships moving into attack formation exactly as predicted. The Zephyrians were confident, approaching the asteroids in 3 distinct waves just like Major Linda Scott had anticipated. "This is Reconnaissance 1 to command," Sarah transmitted. "Enemy fleet in perfect formation, initiating quantum cascade in 3, 2, 1, now." Throughout the asteroid field, hundreds of hidden quantum disruption mines activated simultaneously. The effect was unlike anything seen before in galactic warfare. Cascading waves of energy that disrupted electronics, disabled weapons, and left the mighty Zephyrian fleet helpless. All ships disabled in the first wave, reported Colonel Lucy, Price from the tactical center. Their shields are down, weapons offline. We have maybe 10 minutes before they restore power. Then let's make those 10 minutes count, Admiral Miller replied. The human fleet emerged from hiding among the asteroids. Like avenging angels, ships that had seemed hopelessly outgunned suddenly found themselves attacking disabled targets. Mining vessels commanded by colonist volunteers struck at Zephyrian cruisers with modified fusion cutters. Earth Defense Force fighters swarmed around, enemy dreadnoughts targeting critical systems. Captain Ben Parker led the first assault wave against the Zephyrian command ships. Remember, we're not trying to destroy them all. We're creating chaos, making them afraid. Pilot Frank Green, flying a new fighter built from the wreckage of his old cargo hauler, dove straight at Emperor Kethmore's flagship. For Captain Morrison and everyone who died in the first battle, the quantum disruption effect began wearing off after 8 minutes, but by then the human attack had achieved something impossible. The Zephyrian fleet was in complete disarray. Ships collided with each other trying to restore formation. Communication. Systems failed across the fleet. For the first time in centuries, Zephyrian military discipline collapsed. Emperor Kethmore watched his perfect fleet dissolve into chaos and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. How are they doing this? Our ships are superior. Our weapons are more powerful. But Fleet Admiral Vextar had no answers. The humans were fighting like no enemy they had ever faced, using tactics that seemed impossible. On Vesta Prime, Commander Beth Young led the ground defense as Zephyrian dropships attempted to land. But the aliens found that the colonists had prepared surprises on the surface too. Electromagnetic pulse mines activated, reported former teacher Linda Scott, who now commanded the anti-aircraft defenses. Their landing craft are crashing into the lake again. The Zephyrian troops who did manage to land found themselves fighting an enemy that used every advantage of their home terrain. Farmers turned soldiers like Pete Morgan led ambush attacks from hidden tunnels. Children guided human forces through secret passages, while elderly colonists operated communication networks from underground bunkers. But the battle's decisive moment came when engineer Paul Carter implemented the colonists' final surprise. Working. With Dr. Kevin Ross's quantum theories and engineer Maria Lopez's power systems, they had turned Vesta Prime's entire industrial infrastructure into a massive weapon. Planet-wide power surge ready, Paul reported to General Taylor. This will drain every power cell on the planet, but it should create an electromagnetic pulse visible from across the galaxy. Do it, General Taylor ordered. The pulse erupted from Vesta Prime like a man-made star going nova. Across the solar system, every piece of Zephyrian technology shut down completely. The mighty Imperial fleet found itself dead in space, floating helplessly among the asteroids they had come to clear. In that moment of complete enemy helplessness, Admiral Miller made the decision that would echo across galactic history. All ships concentrate fire on the Emperor's flagship. Today we end Zephyrian expansion forever. The combined human fleet focused every weapon on Emperor Kethmore's massive dreadnought. Mining lasers, military cannons, and improvised missiles struck the enemy flagship from dozens of directions simultaneously. Emperor Kethmore felt his ship shuddering under the human assault, and finally understood what his scouts had tried to tell him. These weren't just another species to be conquered. These were humans, beings who became more dangerous when threatened, more creative when desperate, more determined when protecting their families. Retreat, the Emperor commanded. Signal the fleet to withdraw. But retreat was impossible. The human attack had crippled too many ships, scattered the formation beyond repair. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, which had conquered dozens of worlds, found itself begging for mercy from a small human colony. Admiral Miller opened communication channels to the entire enemy fleet. This is Admiral Grace Miller of the Human Defense Force. You came here to destroy civilian families. You found instead that humans do not surrender, do not retreat, and do not forget. The battle officially ended when Emperor Kethamore's flagship exploded, taking the Zephyrian leader and his command staff with it. The remaining enemy ships surrendered or fled, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been considered an invincible fleet. As news of the victory spread across the galaxy, something unprecedented happened. Species after species rose up against their Zephyrian oppressors. The Alteran rebellion, led by Veltara, launched successful attacks on 3 Zephyrian strongholds. The Corvan Republic declared independence. Even coalition member species began demanding protection from human forces. On Vesta Prime, the colonists gathered to honor their dead and celebrate their survival. Acting Governor Mike Johnson spoke to a crowd that included humans, Alterans, and representatives from a dozen other species. "We came here seeking a peaceful home," Mike said, looking up at the stars. "We found instead that sometimes peace must be fought for. Today we proved that humans will never bow to tyrants, never abandon their families, and never accept defeat." Admiral Miller stood before a memorial to Captain Jake Morrison and spoke words that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. "Today we proved that when you threaten what humans hold dear, the galaxy itself will tremble. We are not the strongest species among the stars, nor the smartest, nor the most advanced. But we are the ones who will never yield. We are the ones who turn tools into weapons, disadvantages into advantages, and desperate situations into victories." The memorial ceremony was broadcast across known space, watched by billions of beings who had never imagined that a small human colony could defeat a galactic empire. 3 months later, the Galactic Coalition formally recognized humanity as a major species with full voting rights. The Zephyrian Empire, leaderless and demoralized, began breaking apart as subject species claimed their freedom. But perhaps the most important change was something harder to measure. Across the galaxy, when oppressive governments threatened their people, those people looked to the stars and remembered the human colonists who refused to surrender their homes. Vestan Reach became more than a colony. It became a symbol. And humans became more than just another species. They became the ones who proved that no empire, no matter how powerful, could crush the spirit of beings who fought for their families and their freedom. The galaxy had indeed trembled, and it would never be the same again.